Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's public webinar on March 4th, 2015. Our subject tonight is Uranus Pluto moving forward as we get ready to finish up the last of the 7 waxing squares between Uranus and Pluto. First of all, before we get started, I'm going to go through a few housekeeping slides. Thank you for allowing me to do that. I'll try and make it pretty efficient for those of you who've seen these podcasts before. I got to click on my screen. There we go. And so, of course, at the Evolutionary Astrology Network, there's a variety of different ways in which you can study with us. You can listen to the free weekly audio podcasts that we do. You find them on the forecast page of our home menu on our website. We have an astro library that you can subscribe to by 3 different sections, and we have a multimedia course that has 3 segments. A little more information on the Astro Library. We have 3 different sections, as you can see on your screen, that we have put together with over a dozen years of materials from myself and other evolutionary astrologers. You can subscribe for 1 month, 6 months, or 12 months, and you can also do a monthly recurring that you cancel at any time. And right now we have section 1 of the Astro Library is half off, and that will be half off for I think another 10 days. I don't know the date, but if you're interested, it's half off over the next week. And you can go to our website and see a listing of all of the titles in sections 1 and 2. We're reviewing that and redoing it on section 3. That'll be up shortly on the website. Here's our multimedia course.
That special.
Go ahead.
I did mean to interrupt, and I'm sorry. That special is through Saturn retrograde date, which I believe is March 14th.
Okay.
March 14th for that special on the section 1 of the Astro Library, okay?
All right. You had cut out. All right. Thank you very much. Here's our multimedia course, the 3 different segments that we offer with DVDs and binder materials to study and webinar classes, access to 250 hours of audio files. If you are by any chance interested in receiving any segment with the DVDs and live materials, you can receive a $50 off coupon by entering the word evolve, E-V-O-L-V-E, evolve, and you would enter that upon checkout, and it would give you $50 off on any one of our multimedia course segments, which you can purchase for $300 each plus shipping, and again, then get the $50 discount on one or all 3. Here is segment 1 of our multimedia course that we have just finished putting completely online. Uranus in Aries, as we are moving through all of these technological advancements that are taking place, and we're getting so much cloud computing on any streaming device, we have got segment 1 ready to be internet friendly and accessible without any materials for $200 US. The $50 coupon does not work with this one. It only works with getting the materials in person. Any questions on any of this while I'm speaking? You are more than welcome to shoot Leroy an email on your Q&A pane. If you look at that orange arrow that shows up for you and you click on that, you're not going to see mine as I'm pointing to it. If you click on the orange arrow, it expands. You'll have a Q&A area where you can type in any questions, and Leroy will answer them as best as he can. He'll interrupt me if he has anything that he wants me to address. And also, if you yourself have USB connection to your internet device with a headset or earbuds, iPhone, you are welcome to ask any questions live as we interact over the next 2 hours. I have a lot of information to cover, and I'm hoping that I can time myself and get through it for you with over the next 2 hours here. And so here is our subject material, and in case you're interested, that picture in the background is the streets of New York City with the rising seawall coming up. I don't know whether it's actually gotten that high or if this is a simulation of what could be happening with the polar ice caps melting. But I thought that was a little interesting slide to show as we look at tonight's material. So first of all, when we look at Uranus and Pluto as a planetary pair, and they meet in the sky and they go around, and Uranus is faster until it catches up with Pluto, and they meet in the sky again a second time, on average, they have a 127-year cycle together from conjunction to conjunction. I'll show you two examples of this in history so you can look at that. But again, this 127-year cycle is on average. Sometimes it's 135 years. Sometimes it's only 115. It varies. This is averaged out. Many of us in the world of evolutionary astrology might recognize that we know Pluto as the soul and Uranus as the individuated unconsciousness. So when we look at these two planets together as a cycle or a planetary pair, what we're looking at is the soul and its individuated unconsciousness. Now we are looking at this from an individual perspective for every single soul who exists on planet Earth. We are also looking at it on a collective perspective. Pluto can also represent the collective soul of human consciousness, and it can represent that individuated unconsciousness on a collective level as well. Think about how we all look collectively at a previous event, say 9/11, that happened in the U.S. About, 13 years ago. You know, it's still conscious, but it's starting to recede into the unconscious, but it's still there on a collective level. We also will know this cycle as the deconditioning factors to liberate on a soul level. And this is also true both on an individual and a collective level. Both of these planets individually represent revolution and revolutionary cycles. You can study Uranus' cycle through the zodiac, Aries to Pisces. You can do the same thing with Pluto, and both of them alone by themselves will deal with revolutionary events on planet Earth individually and collectively. A key word that we tend to use in EA for Uranus is transformation, where step by step we are in the process of unfolding into something new as we leave the past behind. We have a tendency to look at Pluto as metamorphosis, that literal or figurative death and rebirth. Anyone who's been through a Pluto aspect to their natal chart can reflect back and know that there are those things in your life that just get exploded out to the smithereens, and something new has to take its place. A couple of other key words. Uranus is very much associated with freedom, and Pluto is associated with security. Let's look at this from the natural zodiac. What we have here is Uranus has rulership of Aquarius and the 11th house. Pluto has rulership of Scorpio and the 8th house. And so even in the natural zodiac, these two planets are in a natural square to each other. Thought that was an interesting little tidbit as I started prepping my notes and just wanted to share that with you. If we look at taking that circle of 12 and dividing it by the harmonics of 2, 3, and 4, we have polarities, modalities, and elements. And Uranus gets that key word of freedom when we look at active polarity in the element of air. It's fixed, it's active fixed air here. Pluto, keyword security. Security is that passive polarity, and it's water, emotions. It's also the fixed modality. They both share the fixed modality, but whereby Uranus is fixed air, I'm right, you're wrong. Pluto is fixed emotions. This is what I feel, and I feel this deeply. So just a couple of key phrases here to just keep in mind as we go through our information and the rest of these slides over the next couple of hours. So Pluto, as I said before, represents that dual desire nature within the soul. That dual desire nature is separating and returning desires. Separating desires are anything and everything. Any incarnated soul has a desire to achieve, create, manifest. The lover, the job, the baby, the house, the clothes, the vacation, the, study of higher law, whatever it is. Returning desires is one desire, to know that from which we came, or to return to universal source. The wave returning to the sea is one way you can look at it symbolically. Uranus, as we mentioned before, represents that unconsciousness, what's not very familiar on any soul on an individual level. Individuated unconsciousness. That contains 3 areas of information to each soul. The past, which means each and every lifetime we've ever lived, that memory goes somewhere. It's stored in the unconsciousness. Many of us will access it in hypnotherapy, regression methods, or going through a life crisis of some sort. Sometimes a spontaneous memory will come up with a Neptune transit. There's various ways as the soul is evolving and expanding in consciousness awareness that will have that past pop up. The individuated unconsciousness also contains the present moment, whatever we are wanting to suppress or avoid in our day-to-day life. We call that the Saturnian world. It also contains the blueprints of the future, how we are glimpsing into our own individual future and how our own soul, Pluto, gives us information, Uranus, about how to move forward. And one of the things we say about this archetype of Uranus when it concerns the future is you pay attention to the element of repetition about the future. The more any glimpse, any vision, any idea pops up again and again and again and again, it's where your own soul is meant to go. Many times we will ignore those glimpses into the future because it means radical difference from where we are right now. Many times when we look back after a major event in our life, we can see the Uranian blueprints of the future were there. We just were doing the Saturnian suppression with it and ignoring or avoiding. Now you'll also see at the bottom of the screen that I just wanted to share with you from the perspective of natural law or natural spiritual principles. It is natural to exhaust the separating desires through the creation of them. If we could all pray ourselves perfect in a monastery or convent, we could snap our fingers and be gone. In the natural world, that doesn't happen. Those are human-made distortions that we've been led to believe as a truth. When in reality, we have lifetime after lifetime of exhausting the separating desires till the returning desire becomes stronger, stronger, and eventually the only desire left. We call that an avatar or a very consciously evolved soul, like a Buddha. Here is what I consider the most important screen on this class to pay attention to on an individual basis. Because what we will find with this cycle between Uranus and Pluto, when they make individual aspects to our chart, and for all of us, when they make those famous aspects with each other, the waxing first quarter squares we've been looking at 2012 to 2015, these are the 2 planets that represent how each of us will experience what we could call the famous upsets that happen in our life. The husband leaves us. The mother dies. We lose our job. A major natural event comes along and half of our small community is wiped out. whether it is man-made or natural, inorganic or organic, Uranus and Pluto being so revolutionary, will always be involved in some way with those major upsets that come along and happen in our life. And when this takes place, what we are at is a very important choice point. We have a choice to cling to the past. And if we cling to that past and tend to repeat it, the repetition will start to come in an ever-increasing intensity in order to get us to leave it behind. The other choice point is to jump gun-ho into the future and just leave it behind and go forward. When that happens, we'll go forward until we reach some level of insecurity, and it slows us down. It even has us go back if we didn't understand why we were leaving the past behind, or why we were being forced to leave the past behind. Most of us, the choice point is to vacillate between the past and the future in the present moment. I want something different. I want to change, but I'm afraid to let go of what I've known up to this point. I've been going along in my work and my career in this way for years. Been in this job for a decade. And yet I keep getting this message to do something different. How many of us have the courage to let that go and to actually leap into the future unknown without any security? So most of us go back and forth in that present moment. And so this quote that I've put below, this is the essence of Uranus and Pluto. As a planetary pair, wherever they may be in their 127-year cycle, what is necessary in order to break free from the past and find the courage in the present to move forward into a new future? So where are we being presented with needing to break free from the past? How do we process through it in the present moment? And then how do we find our courage in the present and move forward to create a new, unknown future? Now, you will fill in the details by where Pluto is, by sign Capricorn and house natally in your chart, and Pluto and Capricorn transiting in your chart. That's going to be where you want to really hold on to the past, hold on to the security of the future. And Pluto will create the Plutonian explosions if necessary. And Uranus in that first quarter square to Pluto right now in Aries and in a transiting house relative to its natal signature as well by natal house and sign. That's where you really are trying to find that courage to break free and move forward into the future. Now I'm going to show some chart examples here. Chart example is going to be more on a collective basis though. I myself went back and forth going, do I put some personal charts in here? And by the time I got done with my information, I was like, oh, if I open that door, we could spend the next 2 hours and not get past the slide. So I thank you for bearing with me. If you really want more detailed information by Uranus in Aries via 12 houses, Pluto in Capricorn via all 12 houses, I recommend section 3 of our Astro Library. Subscribe for 1 month and you can easily get those 2 planets and how to work with that in your own chart. For those of you who really want your chart looked at, I will offer to people who are attending this series or this class 20% off on natal readings if you would like one, or not natal, 20% off on a session with Kim Marie. You can go to the forecasting page on our website and you can look at the drop-down menu on consultations and click on one of those, and you at checkout would enter the coupon Uranus. Enter the coupon Uranus at checkout for a 20% discount if you'd like to have a personal reading. So thank you for allowing me. I will try and give personal examples as we go through as best as I can. And if you want that personal detail, I'm very willing to look at your chart with you. Now, I'd like to just review here for a moment as well. Here are the 7 Uranus waxing squares to Pluto that happened between 2012 and 2015. And as you can see, the 7th one's going to be coming here the middle of March. And once we have that, Uranus will never be less than 90 degrees from Pluto for another 127 years. And so just reflect on where you have anywhere from 8 to 15 degrees Aries in your chart. That is where Uranus is asking you to break free, move forward, liberate from the past. And more clues to the past are going to come from 8 to 15 degrees Capricorn. Now you can extend this out. You can add 5 degrees on here and take it up to 3. You can add 5 degrees here and take it 20. So over this 3-year time period, 2012, 13, 14, that we've just experienced, any cardinal planets between 3 to 20 degrees have been impacted by this waxing square. Chances are there isn't one of us listening to this class who in the last 3 years has not had one of those famous upsets. Let me say it a different way. Chances are, over the last 3 years, every single one of us listening to this class has had a major upset in their life. And so you can start to then reflect upon that and what has it meant for you. The polarity of Capricorn is Cancer. It's asking all of us on a soul level to reach for deeper levels of inner security versus the outer world that some way, somehow isn't functioning quite as much as we would like it to. The polarity of Aries is Libra. As we are busting out, moving forward, breaking free, we do not operate in a vacuum or isolation. There are others who are impacted by our actions to move forward. We are impacted by others, Libra, moving forward and finding new freedoms in their life. So the deep reflection is, where am I clinging to old ways of the past that no longer function for me? How do I process through this? How do I find my courage to move forward, however the universe is presenting it to me in my world? When we look at some of the Uranus-Pluto trends that we have going on, there isn't an area of life that Uranus and Pluto are not activating. I've just listed a few of them that I want to talk about on a collective level. But again, here we are breaking down those outworn structures and looking at what is the new that is starting to evolve and manifest. And now that we are reaching the 7th of the waxing squares, whatever needed to break down most likely has. There can be an exception or two, but most likely we've all been through the upsets, or at least the majority of them. And we are starting to get a handle as Uranus now moves 91, 92, 93 degrees away from Pluto. We're getting a handle on what it is we have to create in the new ways. And as we are letting go of the past, moving forward, Pluto and Cap, we have to maintain present-day reality. We still have to put food on the table, we still have to change the baby's diapers, and we still got to go to our job. We got to pay the mortgage. But you can just look at some of these keywords that I've put up here and do another individual reflection on how you're being affected by Uranus Pluto in each of these areas. Because on a collective level, Uranus Pluto in their waxing squares are doing this collective break down the past, move it forward in each one of these areas. Now, this is not an exhausted list. This is not inclusive. These are just keywords that came up to me that as I was working through my prep of everything. So just look at where in these areas something's not working for you. Just on an intuitive level. And where on these areas are you seeing new horizons? Are you seeing the need to find your courage to step up and do it differently than you have before? So Uranus plus Pluto always represents collective uprisings. Remember I said the most important screen was that between the two of them, they were so revolutionary. They're always going to represent the famous upsets that each of us on a personal level go through. Well, we're all going through our individual changes and uprisings together as a collective, as a race, as a belief system, as a country, as a human species. So while I'll use some examples of Uranus Pluto from those perspectives, remember on the deepest level possible, all of these uprisings and changes that these two strong planets bring forth, on the deepest levels, broadest levels possible, it's happening to us as a human species. So there will be some cycles that will be broader than what country we're born into, what belief system we are. For example, the technology of social media via smartphones. You can go to about any third world country now and find people with those smartphones, tweeting all kinds of things out there. Here is Uranus-Pluto conjunctions from 2 cycles ago in the 1850s to the last cycle, the 1960s, the swinging 60s. Many of us might have some pretty fairly conscious memories of the last time Uranus went past Pluto. And then here's the next conjunction cycle coming up in 2104. So you can see here there were 3 conjunctions in 1850, 51, in 28 to 30 degrees Aries. The 1965-66 conjunctions took place between 16 and 17 degrees Virgo. There will be only 1 conjunction in 2104 at about 7-8 degrees Taurus. Now, because of the elliptical orbit of Pluto, Pluto's 248 years through the zodiac, because it's so slanted from the ecliptic, it'll spend anywhere between 10 to 30 years in a sign of the zodiac, slowing down, speeding up. And that's why between Uranus and Pluto, when they have an aspect, it's possible that it happens only 1 time, regardless of the aspect. And it's also possible that it can happen up to 7 times, regardless of the aspect. I'm going to take you through just a little quick review of the last 2 Uranus-Pluto conjunctions, because it'll start to give you some idea of what we are in the midst of in current time here with the waxing squares. So those 1850-51 conjunctions, again, were between 28 and 30 degrees Aries. During the 1840s, 1850s, we had massive immigrations coming from Europe to the U.S., wanting a better life, wanting to be able to have various freedoms, whether religious or economic. There was just a massive influx of souls coming along during that time period. So how silly are we at the Uranus Pluto waxing squares to think we can now get to the point we can, turn around and move 10, 15 million people back out. Stay tuned. We'll see how that goes through. The California Gold Rush, 1848. Remember, they were called the 49ers? It's because in 1849, everybody from Iowa and Missouri and eastern side of Texas went west. And the following 2 years later, California became a state. Now, the reason I put that in, I'm going to show you a map here. I put that in because that's when we really started recognizing that the manifest destiny would happen. There's two interpretations of manifest destiny. One from the very beginnings of European people coming over to the U.S. and wanting their religious and economic freedom from England and Europe. They really wanted to do it differently than the old ways. So they thought that if they could do it in a pure enough way, Puritans, anybody? That by natural law, or I shouldn't say natural law, God's law, it was their destiny to manifest the new world. The other definition of manifest destiny is kind of the opposite. It's the distortions. There was that intent to come over and do it differently, but we still ended up pretty imperialistic in the U.S. and probably don't need to tell anybody on this class what happened to the natives. And so it was in the late 1840s that this word manifest destiny was coined, and everybody was talking about it, some for it, some against. And when California became a state in 1850, we had states from the eastern seaboard to the west. And of course, as you're reading along on this, Uncle Tom's Cabin galvanized the abolitionist movement. All throughout the 1850s, there was tension between the North and the South in the U.S. of whether we were going to be a country with slaves or a country without slaves. And the South needed the slaves or their economy would collapse, and that's exactly what happened when we fought the Civil War and the North won and slavery was abolished. The North recovered quite easily. It had an influx of all the black Americans coming north. The South took a long time. The South took, if I remember my reading correctly in my studies for this, it took the South a good 40 years to recover, which is all the time Uranus would have been new phase to Pluto, going through from 0 to 45 degrees and trying to help the South recover. The 1860s was when railroads were coming across the U.S. The Pacific Railroad, the first Continental Railroad, I think that was like 1868 when it was finally done. When you're working with these broad circles, you start looking at 5, 10-year increments of time and recognize the 10 years leading up to 1850, the 10 years following, even going into the 60s, you still had Uranus new phase Pluto with this new cycle. So you could see some of the things that were taking place. These examples are U.S. I have a worldwide example as well. Look at this statistic from the Civil War. In 4 years' time period in the United States, 8% of all white males between 13 and 43 were killed in war. And of course, I thought, Lincoln assassinated 15 years after these Uranus-Pluto conjunctions. I put that in there because I'll show you the examples in the 60s. Anybody remember who was killed in the 60s going through there? But here's a little interesting thing for you. There were states that freed the slaves before the Civil War. This is the green band. Here's the states in which slavery was legal. And so this was the big battle that they started going through in the last Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Think of this to the 1960s with the civil rights movement of blacks in the South. Now think of this as we're going through 2012, 2015 in Ferguson, Missouri, and as we're seeing the racial issues that are coming up. Here's these Uranus-Pluto cycles carrying forward, slowly but surely evolving and liberating. California was a state. These were still territories, all right? These were territories that allowed slavery. These were territories that did not allow slavery. But once California became the state, the rest of this all filled in between the 1950s and 60s. My state, South Dakota, came in 1889. There was just a few late ones up here. And then we had, of course, Hawaii and Alaska in the 20th century in the 1900s. But there was a galvanization that came through when California became a state in late 1850. It just allowed this to fill in and allowed that manifest destiny to come place. And of course there was again this battle back and forth, back and forth. Free slaves, not free slaves. Here's this cycle from a little bit of a more worldwide perspective, although it includes the U.S. as well. Look what happened in 1847, 3 years before the conjunctions. Kerosene was distilled from petroleum. Oil and petroleum, many feel, are ruled by Neptune, which rules Pisces. We would have had Uranus and Pluto in Pisces when this took place. Look what happened 12 years later. 1859, still within orb of this conjunction, the first commercial oil wells for drilling took off. And it's not slowed down since. And look at this first quarter square that we have going on, 2012, 2015, and we had the oil boom up here in the northern plains where I'm from, and now we have the oil possible bust going on. What's happening here in the U.S. is we're producing the oil, but we don't have the refineries to finish it off. And that's also starting to add into what's creating some of this glut. But isn't this interesting that this explosion between this last conjunction with oil, petroleum and oil, and what effect it's having on climate change? There were a lot of machines created in this time period right here, the 1840s, 50s into the 60s. But I thought this one was kind of neat for you. Here's one of the early sewing machines. The first commercial washing machine started to come about during this time. A lot of these industrial type, machines took place instead of doing it by hand. We had the Taiping Revolution, excuse my mispronunciations. We thought we lost a few people in the Civil War. 20 million Chinese peasants were taken out in the 1950s with this revolution in China. The Crimean War. Crimea was where we had the Winter Olympics with Russia a year ago. And that war started. This is the war that really started all the big battles between Russia and everybody else over around Eastern Europe. Those are still going on. Here we are, another cycle later, and a Uranus-Pluto waxing square, and we've got Ukraine in the old Crimea spot, still battling it out with Russia. Of course, many of us might be familiar, 1859, Darwin published The Origin of the Species, theorizing evolution. Was quite controversial when it came out, still controversial to the fundamentalist religions. So that's just an idea of what has happened in the past when we put Uranus and Pluto together in the sky. I didn't take time to research natural events. I'm sure they're there. I just only have so much time in the day to research, so I looked more for political, economic, social unrest stuff. Let's look at this one. I'll try and do it a little quicker, because many of us were perhaps alive during this conjunction. The swinging 60s, when we had the three conjunctions, 16 to 17 degrees Virgo. Look at how the Vietnam War sandwiched that between 55 and 75. Prior to this time period, the U.S. had fought major wars, but we didn't have a continual war going on. And since this time period, since this last Uranus Pluto conjunction, the U.S. has been in war at one point or another all the time, either overtly announcing it or covertly. There was a real shift here with this last conjunction in the U.S. when it came to war. Remember, was it the end of the Second World War in 1945? I'm not going to remember the planetary aspects, but was it Roosevelt or Eisenhower that warned us of the military-industrial complex? Well, by the time it got to this Uranus-Pluto conjunction, it was ready to take off. Look at the things that were created here in the 1960s. Peace Corps were established. Of course, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis that went on. This almost created our first nuclear war. Bay of Pigs in Cuba backed down. Assassinations, 1963, JFK, Malcolm X. 1968, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy. 1964, Civil Rights Act passed. Wilderness Act passed. 65, National Voting Rights Act passed. And what happened at the first quarter square? Our conservative majority Supreme Court voted down key provisions of the National Voting Rights Act. Now, there's another part of this act that if it was enforced, we could change it around, but nobody's enforced it since 1965. And I'm not going to remember the details of it other than to the degree that we want to gerrymander the district's representation has to be decreased. In other words, instead of having 535 senators and, well, it'll be more the House of Representatives because they're the ones that vary. Each state gets 2 senators in the U.S. The 435 in the House of Representatives, there's in our Constitution, it's not the National Voting Rights Act, Constitution, that we can decrease our representatives in the House if we're not having the fairness in voting. I'm not remembering all the details. I apologize for that. 1966 was when they initiated the draft and sent 500,000 young U.S. soldiers to Vietnam. I know that you guys can think back on it and see the hippie bus and the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's the revolution of Pluto and Uranus from Betty Crocker, Marble Man, with the Pluto and Cancer generation. And Beatles, you guys can just, you notice the things that were happening in the 60s. And the environment was also in the picture. And so now here we are at the first quarter square to that, and what's manifesting? Stay tuned. Here's a slide on some of the international things that happened during this time period. The U.S. did the first atomic bomb in Hiroshima to end World War II back in 1945. France detonated an atomic bomb in 1960, China in 1964. The uranium and plutonium energy galvanized in the last conjunction. Canada passed a Bill of Rights in 1960. Look at this. I did not know this. First Nations, first time the natives were allowed to vote in Canada. We constructed the Berlin Wall. There's a photo for you. 1961. Second Vatican Council took place here. I didn't look up the details on it. I just thought, oh gosh, they're gonna, if somebody knows, you can type it into Leroy and he can put a couple of words into the recording. But Uranus, Pluto, and Virgo, I was like, I'm just seeing from the swinging 60s some backlash going on of, women can't have abortions or have birth control or whatever. So can't say I researched this. 1967 was the 6 Days War that Israel fought with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, in which the entire boundaries of the Middle East was reorganized. Now, there were other countries that were in it from behind the scenes or supportive of it, but these were the major players in the 6 Days War. And this has been going on ever since. And look at, here we are, first quarter square, and United States Republicans invite the Prime Minister of Israel to speak in front of the House of Representatives without giving a courtesy notice to the United States President. Anybody notice that in the news last couple of days? So you can kind of go with these big hits of Uranus Pluto and just look at so many of these issues, if not all issues, come to a head. And does something move forward? Does it fall back? We know these are waxing squares. They're meant to move forward. But the pole from 0 to 90 degrees is to go back to the past because it represents security. This is generic on the cycle of phases and aspects. And finally, we had that Cultural Revolution 66-76 in China. And we've seen how China has clamped down so much in their world in regards to human rights. It would be interesting to see if something comes through in the next 5-10 years in regards to China and human rights breaking out in that area. So this is just to give you some glance at some of the major collective things that have happened when Uranus interacts with Pluto. Basically, this has just been the conjunctions. We don't have time to go all the way through, but just looking at the conjunctions, which is death of an old cycle and initiation of a new one, you can see how it's followed through over the cycles, and you can see how some issues, say for instance the whole issue of Black Americans in the United States, how it's recycled. I think we'll see a lot of environmental issues recycled through the current Uranus-Pluto cycle. I think we'll see a lot of the social rights issues come through, and my personal one, economic or monetary issues. Here's these first quarter squares again from 2012 to 2015. What I want to point out to you now is that these waxing squares will remain within a 10-degree orb for 5 more years. We're at the beginning of 2015, all the way through 2019. End of 2019, they move into that 15, and then, 15 and 20-degree orb, and into that the following decade of the 2020s. So through the rest of this decade, even though we don't have the squares anymore, they're still within orb, and Uranus is out of the gate, so to speak. It is in that first quarter phase, and it wants to break free, bust out. Here is a little bit of a longer-term picture looking at those phases. I'll show you 2 screens with this. I'll show you this one with the timing and degrees, and then I'll show you this visually. So as Uranus moves beyond 90 degrees, and it's had these 7 first quarter squares, it's now from 90 to 135 degrees, which is known as the first quarter phase. Crises in action. This is a yang phase, energy moving out. 2012 through 2015, Uranus and Pluto have been going yin-yang, yin-yang, yin-yang. Now it's yang. It is energy moving out from the center. Uranus will move from 15 Aries to 3 degrees Cancer, so it's going to be going through the first 3 signs of the zodiac, moving into the beginning of the 4th. Pluto will move from 15 Cap to 18 degrees Aquarius. It'll move about 30 degrees in two of the outer archetypes of the zodiac. So isn't it interesting, as Uranus does these first quarter squares, it's in the first four archetypes of the zodiac. Pluto is in the last quarter of the natural zodiac by signs. When we get to 2034, and I'll revisit this one for you, you can see here's gibbous phase, 2034 to 2048, 135 to 180 degrees. Gibbous is yin. Energy moves back to the center again. And you can see here Uranus will go from 3 Cancer to 8 Virgo. Pluto will go from 18 Aquarius to 8 degrees Pisces. Let me show you this perspective from a visual way. When we look at the cycle of phases and aspects between any two planets, we take a 360-degree cycle and we divide it into 8. This is called the 8th harmonic. And if you look at these, you'll see that energy goes from yang, yin, yang, yin. You'll see that we have these 8 phases going back and forth between how the energy operates. That's a key thing to understand. We also have the phases right here, and we have key words for them. If you're interested in this and are unfamiliar, I go over this in detail in probably section 2 of the Astro Library and a lot of detail in segment 1 of our course. But anytime you compare two planets, now, yes, that planet will be somewhere in that circle in the natal chart, or looking at Uranus-Pluto transits, it'll be in the houses where it's transiting in your chart. But you start with that slower moving planet and you make it the 0-degree point. And then you take the faster moving planet and you move it counterclockwise till you find the number of degrees the faster moving planet is from the slower moving planet. So what I did for you is I put this conjunction that happened in Virgo, 16, 17 degrees Virgo in the middle 60s. Uranus was new phase to Pluto until 1986-87 when they had the first quarter, or they had the crescent semi-squares. Then Uranus became yin phase between 87 to 2012, 2015 as it went back and forth here 7 times. This is where we are right now. Remember, I said Uranus 2015 to 34 for the next 20 years, first quarter phase. In the midst of this, here's the time period, 2026-28, when there will be a waxing trine between the two. Ease of effort, ease of resistance. We could see some positive things happen. We might see some rollbacks here. When we get closer, I will look at the minor aspects, but it's not, I don't have enough time. I'm not even paying attention to time here as to how I'm going. Okay, I think I'm okay. And then here's where we're going to go to gibbous phase, as we looked at before in this time period. Here's where we'll have the quincunx aspects. That'll be highlighting the gibbous phase of self-analysis. And it'll be 2046-48 before we have the oppositions of Uranus to Pluto. When the oppositions come, Uranus will be in Virgo, Pluto will be in Pisces. So I held what I've done here is I've made the degrees from 0 to 360 stationary. And we're moving the planets and we're ignoring signs, but I'm pointing those out to you. So this can just give you some idea here of how major the cycle is between these two planets. And while we've been so excited for 2012, 2015, they've went back and forth. Past 90 degrees, less than 90. They've went back and forth in their struggle to manifest. Yin, yang, yin, yang, yin, yang. And that's why there are perhaps some things that we've looked at over the last few years that we've wanted to see take off that started but didn't quite go anywhere. Occupy Wall Street, Arab Spring. We will be looking towards these next 5 years to really see more manifestations start to come out. And we can extend it all the way throughout the next 20 years to see Uranus in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, really working to manifest new from Pluto relative to the middle 60s conjunctions. So if the revolutions aren't coming fast enough for you, take heart. We've just been building up. If you're ready for it to calm down, you might want to go find a nice little island in the Bahamas and just chill out from planet Earth for a while, because these two planets don't, they're the two powerhouses in the zodiac. And they bring the collective uprisings and the revolutions. And so, again, here's this slide to show you. We look at this whole issue of Uranus-Pluto trends in every area of life, on an individual level and on a collective level. And because these are waxing squares, we're just finished, and we're moving into first quarter phase between these two, there will be increasing pressure to break down outworn structures in every area of life. And following will be new forms. These new forms have been gestating since the 1960s. The last Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And now we must move from the gestation of crescent phase to the manifestation of first quarter phase. So as you're looking at all of the visual stories I've been putting here in this class, you can see some of the reflections of everything that's been going on and how things have been changing with all of this. I'd like to just briefly look at all of these issues right here from a collective viewpoint. Not an exhaustive list, just little bullet points to get you started. And then I have one more area that we'll go through after this. And so, just looking at Uranus-Pluto with politics, you can look all around. Doesn't perhaps matter what country you're in the midst of. There's a big polarization issue going on. That's the first quarter square between retreating to the past and moving forward into the future. Whether it's conservatives versus liberals in the U.S., or Greece, or Russia, or the Middle East, or South America, whatever country you look in, there will be a certain amount of this polarization that's going to go forward throughout the next 5 years, the rest of this decade. The plutocrats do not want to give up. And so the change, or whatever changes that will come, have to happen from the grassroots up. It has to be a masses situation. Rarely do we have those political leaders that can stand up and create the change that we want to see. Lincoln did it not only with civil rights, but also with banking policies, and he got taken out. JFK, there are those who feel he did the same thing in regards to war, and what doesn't show up in the book so much, also in regards of monetary policies. So the biggest changes that come with Uranus-Pluto, if you look at them throughout history, it's been settled by the masses. And if the masses go to sleep, we'll retreat. If the masses choose to wake up, things will come through, things will come out, things will happen. Leroy, I think our young adult came home. I would ask you to give him a little simple reminder to stay off the internet for me. Thank you, honey. And so, moving on to monetary. This is my soapbox. This is my pet subject that I love to study and educate on. Money's very closely tied into politics, doesn't matter what country you're talking about. And there's potential for massive upheavals as this battle for private versus public control of banking to take place worldwide. Many countries have what we call central banks. The country creates its own currency. It was written into the U.S. Constitution. The history of the United States is based upon the battle for control of the ability to create money. European interests coming over to the U.S., and it's been a battle throughout the history of the U.S. up until 1913. Wonder where Uranus Pluto was then. I didn't get a chance to look at this one. And the private bankers won. But there is a grassroots effort that's taking place here to create public central banking. If you've heard of BRICS, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America. Each of those countries have almost half to 3/4 of their banking public central banking. And so sometimes when the U.S. and the European elites, which are private central banking, take on some of these other countries, go and study. Just go and look and see, are they public or private? And if you want an easy resource to find them, right here, one of my favorite books by Ellen Brown, The Public Banking Solution, that came out in 2013. I expect to see more of this, and if you live in the United States, I would so encourage you to get involved in your state with this movement. Just research Ellen Brown's book or the publicbankinginstitute.org and you can figure out how to get involved with this. I look at Uranus Pluto as being key to this quote-unquote battle over central banking, to be whether or not there's prosperity for all or just a few. We have a beautiful example of this taking place for 100 years in the state of North Dakota, doing business as the Bank of North Dakota. All the bank income, or all the state income and assets, in other words, all the interest earned by the state, it's returned back to the state, back to the citizens. It does not mean because we have public central banking that there's going to be inflation or government running amok. We have beautiful examples of it. I strongly urge you to educate yourself in this area. You can go to our website and do a search. I've done lectures on this, and I won't say any more. I talk about this a lot. This book will do it for me. But this, I do think, is going to be in the news over the next decade, the rest of this decade, moving into the next decade, as Pluto comes to the U.S., Pluto, and we have our return. This is going to be one of the major issues that's going on. And the corporate media will try to keep this out of the news as much as possible. Follow it, Uranus and Aries, through technology. The environment, I mean, we could do an entire slideshow on what's happened to the environment since the last Uranus-Pluto, or the Uranus-Pluto conjunction of the 1850s, 2 cycles ago. Such major upheavals as we had all of the technological explosions that took place since then. And while humans have paid the price, nowhere has the price been paid more than in natural environmental areas by all species. Species being decimated left and right. I probably am preaching to the choir here. This can be a major trigger for the issue around money and society and politics with regard to Uranus-Pluto, because climate change is not going to go away. And it's going to, in this next cycle, the rest of this Uranus-Pluto cycle lasts the rest of the 21st century. 21st century, yes, 21st century. massive refugee migrations. Tell me that's not going to have political effects, societal effects, monetary effects. Insurance won't be able to keep up with it. There are some insurance frauds that are coming out from Sandy Hook that's just starting to make the news here about how people were denied their rightful insurance claims with engineering fraud. There's all kinds of areas where we will see things happening to the environment. Personally, I don't think it's too late to really affect change. But if we move through the Uranus Pluto squares and we move through first quarter to the 120-degree aspect, that, when did I say those were going to help? Hold on a second, I will refer back to that one slide. The waxing trines of Uranus to Pluto are 2026, 28. If we don't really start making changes by then, that might be one of those crucial turning points for timing, because the trines, ease of resisting, ease of sliding it under the rug. Let's hope that through this first quarter phase we do make those changes for the environment. Career, I don't have to tell anybody what's happened with Pluto in Capricorn since 2008. But if you look back on those slides that I had with Uranus and Pluto conjunctions, technological explosions destroy jobs, they create jobs. And depending on where each of us are, we might be on the plus side or the negative side. And so really being able to be aware of how these changes are coming across and go with the flow. I mean, at some point, I think there's going to be a lot of jobs in the environment, cleaning it up, let alone reversing it, recycling all of the waste we put into the oceans, we put into the land, we put into you name it. We really have to, essentially, with these types of changes, when it comes to human resources and jobs and careers, you really have to work for inner security over outer security. This is where you go back to those individual statements and you just say, where is the past presenting itself to me that I need to let go of? And how do I do my best to maintain in the present moment as I move forward to whatever glimpses are coming at me with the future? And of course, going back to the whole monetary issue, if we have public central banking and interest is returned back to governmental coffers, statewide, countywide, citywide, federally, and you can look at this internationally as well, when that happens, we really can take care of our crumbling infrastructures. We can create those jobs. Remember, we had the 1930s. In the 1930s, it was a Uranus cycle ago, we had Pluto in Cancer, and we had Uranus 3/4 of the way around, last quarter squares, Uranus in Aries. And it was in the 1930s that we passed, it's called CCC. It created a lot of jobs up here in the northern plains where I'm at, and we had the dirty 30s and banking collapses, and then we had a huge drought up here, and there was no farming up here. And so we created all these federal jobs to put men to work to feed their families, and we built an infrastructure. And we continued to build that infrastructure, and it was in the 1960s that we really finished up what we call the interstate system in the U.S. We really haven't been working with that infrastructure replenishment since then. So Uranus Pluto is, some of the surprises could be, another bridge collapsing like it did in Minneapolis here 5-6 years ago. We had one. Well, wait till we have a dozen bridges collapse. then we have no choice. These are the types of changes that Uranus Pluto bring up. We don't have to, on a collective level, wait till it falls apart. All of us are seeing glimpses into the future in the environment, in the haves and have-nots between the 1% and 99%. We can see so much of what needs to be done if we had that courage in the present moment to do something about it. So collectively, that's why we need some of these intense Uranus-Pluto aspects to bring about these changes, to leap forward us out of the past and into the future. Now, something I haven't mentioned quite yet here is the polarity of Uranus and Aries is Libra. And the polarity of Pluto and Capricorn is Cancer. And this is, again, where I am saying Cancer's community. And that's where some of that grassroots comes in. Uranus, yes, Uranus is community. Uranus is like-minded friends. Uranus is the tribe. Cancer is the tribe as well. Uranus is the tribe that is mentally the same. Cancer is the tribe that's emotionally the same. So yes, that'll bring in family. But it's going to bring in grassroots, and this is also through these polarity points. And Libra's the group versus the Uranian in Aries full of self. And so these two polarity points of these signs point towards societal reactions and responses. It points towards grassroots movements. It points towards addressing any societal oppressions that Pluto in Capricorn is going to try and hang on to for another 7-8 years. So I do think that worldwide grassroots uprisings will continue to happen on a very spontaneous level. And if they don't create the change that's necessary, they'll come back until we do create whatever social changes are necessary. The ending of this Piscean age and the dawning of the Aquarian age, and who knows the date, they really are, asking us to do what Jesus the human said, when you take care of the least of me. Can we continue on without doing that? Yes, but it will just create even starker polarities between the have and the have-nots. And it may happen within borders of countries where you don't expect it, not just in modern countries versus third world countries. If you look back also, collectively, these Uranus-Pluto hits, and I think this is probably true with any of the 8th harmonic aspects, which is conjunctions, semi-squares, first quarter. It's all the aspects that initiate the changes of the 8 phases. During any of those aspects, all these upheavals come through, and national boundaries change. We're seeing it going on right now in Ukraine. Of course, it's been going on since, who knows. I mean, we can go back to the last Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in the Middle East. So you might see more of this coming through, where boundaries are changing. One of the ways you can see it in the United States politically that has a very strong societal effect is all the gerrymandering of political districts that allow, conservatives versus liberals to get into office. And so far, the conservative factors in the U.S. have went after politics on a statewide level. They've been gerrymandering the political districts so that it's very easy for a conservative to get hired into the House of Representatives. And it's very hard for a liberal to get hired into, or elected into the House of Representatives. This has huge effects on society and whether or not we take care of the social infrastructures. And of course, Pluto in Capricorn, following Sagittarius has a lot to do with the philosophical understandings of life and societies that then Capricorn following Sag lead to laws. Sag is where we battle those legalities, but we also work with creating a lot of those laws in both of those signs and defending them in Capricorn. And so we can look at these Pluto-Uranus trends first quarter. Plutocrats, conservatives all over the planet trying to defeat progressive changes for the masses. And Uranus in Aries is going to continue to fight for more progressive, inclusive changes. Then, of course, I gave the example for the U.S. as, one of the only modern nations in the world without universal health care. And here it is up in the Supreme Court, and it could get derailed in the Supreme Court, even though they have not been able to derail it in the U.S. House. I think this is a trend that we can watch quite closely through Uranus in Aries in the first quarter square, because I really do think the fact that we've got all of the technological advances you could ask for in the U.S. when it comes to healthcare, and they're continuing to expand. It really is a pay-for system. If you've got the money, great. If you don't have the money, it doesn't get you very far. And sooner or later, we're going to have to address that, because we are seeing, for instance, in a place like the U.S., we're seeing a lot of health decline because of all of the corporate farming of the soils, and there's no nutrients in the soil anymore. There's no nutrients to draw from anymore. So we can have all the advances we want, but we're missing the boat. And that was one of the things about that Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Remember Rachel Carlson in Silent Spring? I think it was in the 1960s that book really hit, and we really saw the environmental movement and organic foods start to take off. And it's been expanding ever since, and I don't see it slowing down. We also are going to see a lot of alternative self-healing methods continue to come out. And if you've been reading this screen, I showed you the copy of a book that I had someone give to me about 15 years ago. And this is an alternative healing method that I've been involved with for 15 years. And it really works. If I break a bone, give me a doctor to set the bone. But when it comes to my day-to-day healing with diet, exercise, and rest, that's my self-responsibility. And to have a little extra edge, we can now measure a disease imbalance in consciousness, in energy, before it manifests or after. We can provide a healing frequency in energy, in consciousness, before it manifests or after. If you want more information on that, I've put my facilitator website up here. Again, there's so much that's going to explode in health and wellness. This is where technology of Uranus and Aries will get involved. But when it comes to natural, spiritual laws and principles, there are no substitutes for diet, exercise, and rest. And so it's going to get increasingly more expensive to take care of humans who do not pay attention to their health and wellness. It naturally happens with the aging process. It's exacerbated by how far removed we are from taking care of the environment and the soil and the food, which is the main thing to nurture the temple. So enough about that. I won't belabor. I'm just trying to point on this. Technology, phew, try and stay caught up with it. This is the leading edge. Uranus rules this, and it's in Aries. It started a brand new 84-year cycle. This is where Uranus will move forward, bust forward. Now, anytime you combine Uranus with Neptune or Pluto, their aspects, their cycles are always signifying the evolution of the human ability to create. You go back to the last two Uranus-Neptune cycles. The last Uranus-Neptune conjunction was in 1993, 2021 degree, 19 to 20 degrees Capricorn. And look at the explosion of computers and cell phones and smartphones and all these devices since 1993. You go back one cycle before that to the 1820s. The last time Uranus had a conjunction with Neptune, that was in Capricorn as well. It was earlier degrees. I don't remember. Look at everything that happened with technology between the 1820s and the 1990s. The next Uranus-Neptune conjunction, I think, is the 2160s. It will be in Capricorn as well. We are a material producing machine. And unfortunately, what happens is morality does not keep up with technology. It was one of the key phrases to this technology that I work with. Our phrase is spirituality, frequencies and consciousness. Spirituality in service of technology, in service of helping us self-heal. There's so much going on here. This is going to, it's just going to explode. Who can predict? We're going into 3D printing. Your smartphone is going to become the phone that does everything for you. You'll do your banking on your smartphone. You'll do everything. Smartphones are being replaced by your watches. We're really seeing privacy invasions, but we're also going to see explosions in privacy security as well. That will innovate just as much, the building up as much as the tearing down. Smart machines are going to explode. Try and keep up with all of the devices to just run in a westernized household. Can we? Can the rest of the planet? We're going to have to create smart devices, smart machines that do not take as much resources, that do not take as much energy to run in order for it to be viable for others on planet Earth. And of course, how many of us now are keeping things in the cloud? And they're now making software that'll be in the cloud that you can simultaneously run your different devices on. Whether you have a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or a PC, all those devices will be synced up with whatever software you have, and it'll be cloud computing. And oh, by the way, you won't be buying your software with CDs anymore. You're going to pay a monthly service for your software apps. All of the software applications are switching over to monthly services. In some ways, it'll be less resources in the environment. We won't be putting all those CDs into the environment as we upgrade our software. But on the other hand, if the masses don't hold it in check, there'll be software for those that can afford it. I didn't put net neutrality in here. Everybody can see what that's looking like. The first steam engines really came into play in the 1820s, 1830s when we had the Uranus-Neptune conjunctions in Uranus. But then everything exploded again in the 1850s, 60s with the Uranus Pluto conjunctions in Aries. So to try and look forward to the next 20 years, let alone the rest of this century, just look at how the steam engine looks to us today. And of course, as I said, all this technology, morality is having a tough time keeping up with it all. If you're on the fundamental side of any religion, polarization is going to continue. Again, inherent within the soul, Pluto, and within Uranus, liberation of the soul. We have clinging to the past, jumping into the future, and the easy way out, kind of sifting through the middle, floating where the majority goes. And so then the question becomes, do we go backwards or forwards. And if on some of these issues I'm bringing up, we go backwards, we stick with the tradition, the fundamental side of an issue or religion, it's going to continue to increase polarization. Because there will be those with Uranus and Aries in the waxing squares who are the avant-gardes, who are leading the way ahead, who are exposing the distortions of patriarchal human-made conditionings. We can just look around us. We see it already. It could just have evolutionary leaps of growth here where mass consciousness continues to become aware of our spiritual interrelatedness, the mystical side of all religions, and the interrelatedness of all species on planet Earth. Religion is going to have a tough time keeping up with planetary changes, not just with Uranus Pluto first quarter square, the ending of the Piscean age, and Uranus continuing to evolve with Pluto through this next cycle. When we get to, remember that slide where in 2046 through 48, I think it is, we have Uranus oppositions to Pluto. Again, those oppositions will have Uranus at 8 degrees Virgo and Pluto at 8 degrees Pisces. So by the time we get to the middle of this next century, we're going to continue to see religion and spirituality come to the forefront, come to a real drawn out us versus them battle in this mid-century. And so what we do between now and then makes a big difference in our choices. Of course, we've seen a new Roman Catholic Pope. He's starting to really address some things differently. For probably most of us on this call, he's not going as far in consciousness as we would like to see him see, but he's making steps in regards to consensus beliefs, and he's making steps in regards to the fundamentalist side of his religion. One area where he has not shown any evolution is in gender rights for women. Can't be no women pope or women priests. Even though we had women prostitutes in the Vatican up until the 1300s. And of course, I think one of the things that needs to be brought up here as we look at the distortions of patriarchal conditionings and how there needs to be this shift back to natural law, and I think the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in Virgo, Virgo being an earth sign, has a lot to do with taking care of planet Earth. And so this question of reincarnation, as that comes out, I think we could see waves or time periods where this comes to the surface. And it changes our perspective on everything. And I only put one example up here, PTSD and trauma therapies. When you include the concept of reincarnation, it's a whole different way of looking at it. It's a whole different way of approaching therapy. And oh, by the way, a much different way of bringing about results and answers. For me, one of my methods that I have been involved with is Roger Wolger's work, deep memory processing. So this will continue to trend. I don't know if I want to call it the New Age movement. I think we need a new word for it. I mean, I go with metaphysical. That's the word I tend to state is the metaphysical or beyond physical movement of reaching to understand natural spiritual laws and principles is going to continue to grow. And finally here, the whole gender issue stuff, relationships, family, This is where all of you are feeling it on the personal level. What's fairness for everyone involved in a marriage, in a parent-child situation? What's going on with finding our community again, whether it's blood or spirit? The potential is, again, traditions evolving past these patriarchal extremes we've brought up. But for all of us, we are feeling this very, very personally. Pluto in Cap, Cancer, polarity, it's affecting you on a familial level, whether you're dealing with parents or children or grandchildren or great-grandparents. It's dealing with you, Uranus in Aries with a Libra polarity, one-on-one in your intimate relationships, starting, ending, metamorphosing, what's being brought into consciousness to move through, to address. Now, in this area, I think that equality issues for women is going to be the final frontier of the civil rights movement. Remember, 1850s Uranus Pluto, it was slavery or no slavery. 1960s, that's really when we started initiating the homosexuality rights. That's now turned into LBGT rights that at the Uranus-Pluto first quarter squares are being shot down left and right in the U.S. by our Supreme Court, not moving along that fast in other countries. But you can see how human rights really follow Uranus-Pluto cycles. And probably one of the last areas to see equality is going to be human rights as equals for women because of the extremes of the patriarchal conditionings. Look for that to continue to be in the news somehow, some way. Remember this slide? This is where I was first showing you first quarter phase, the timing of it, 2015 to 2034, the degrees Uranus and Pluto will travel. Here's the gibbous phase, 2034 to 2048, and again, the Uranus-Pluto degrees. There's not enough time, and I gotta check the time again. Thank you all for being so patiently listening. Not enough time to just go through every single thing that's going to be coming up, so I just tried to do a couple slides with highlights. Look at, here's what I've put up here. The last time Jupiter made conjunctions to Pluto, 07, 28 Sag. Jupiter conjunctions to Uranus, 2010 and 11, between 27 Pisces, 0 Aries. Remember? Was only last year, 2014, Jupiter, April 2014, that cardinal grand cross, Jupiter in Cancer opposing Pluto, Mars retrograde in Aries opposing Uranus, and Mars retrograde in Libra opposing Uranus in Aries. Jupiter's moved on. It's going to move on to make last quarter squares 2016, 2017 from Libra to Capricorn. Also in 2016-17, Jupiter will oppose Uranus in Libra to Aries. So here are the dates for you. You can see this is going to be middle degrees as Pluto moves, as both of them move through Capricorn Aries. We're looking at these Jupiter aspects between 15 to 28 degrees Libra. Add on more each side for orbs. Here's just a 0-degree Aries chart. I just pulled a date out of the universe. Early 2017, Pluto 19 Cap. Uranus has made it to 23 Aries. See how there's still first quarter square? Here's Jupiter making its year-long passage through Libra and activating a T-square with these. 2016 to 2017. Any of the subjects that I've mentioned, Anything that I've mentioned collectively or individually, it's not going away soon. So open up your intuition. Look at your charts. Find an astrologer, get a reading. Take astrology classes. It's going to continue to be an exciting time on planet Earth the rest of this decade. What will happen here by 2017, South Node to be in Pisces. It will have just went over Neptune. So we'll have to really watch a sense of victimization here. We might be watching a lot of religious fundamentalism here. We could have health and wellness issues that are coming in the news. Obviously, relationship issues will continue to be there for us. We're going to have to continue breaking free moving forward wherever these two planets, Uranus and Aries, are evolving in our chart. And Jupiter and Libra is going to be asking us to let go of old relationship beliefs and old relationship patternings that are no longer serving our soul. Does that mean everybody's relationship is going to break up? No. Does that mean that some of us might receive last quarter square everything we've worked so hard for? Yes. And everything in between. And we'll all be evolving relationships on a social level, collective level, and on a personal, intimate level. Here it is with the U.S. chart. I thought I'd briefly just show you this because the U.S. chart, and I thank you international listeners for allowing me to use these examples. In the U.S. chart, as we have Pluto transiting in Capricorn, moving ever closer to the Pluto returns in 2022 is when they're going to be happening. We can see that this T-square, here's Jupiter in Libra, here's transiting Uranus in Capricorn, here's Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries. Uranus is going to be going over the U.S. Chiron. It's still within orb of opposing the U.S. Saturn, and Jupiter touching upon that and just moving past that. So I suspect that we will still be having more of, as I said before, haves and have-not battles with Pluto and Capricorn. Infrastructures, societal structures, whatever crumbling, balsamic here between transiting Pluto and the U.S. natal Pluto. That stuff continuing to crumble, and who's going to get wounded by it, who's going to be fractured, traumatized by it, what are we going to do in fairness to all, or are we going to have elitism taking off here even more in the U.S.? All I'm looking at is the T-square, very briefly. Stay tuned. More details in future classes. Here's another one, 2020. I thought this is probably about as far ahead as we can look and start to grasp. Look at all the conjunctions in 2020. We start Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn. We have Jupiter-Pluto 3 times in Capricorn. And then Jupiter conjunct Saturn 1 time, 0 degrees Aquarius. Leaping into the next decade, Jupiter conjuncts Neptune 2022, 24 Pisces, conjunct Uranus 2024, 22 Taurus. Saturn conjuncts Neptune 2026, 1 degree Aries. And we have Saturn conjunct Uranus 2032 at 28 degrees Gemini. So as you're looking at these conjunctions, you can see, just glancing at these, that there's a lot of cycles that are going to be ending and new ones beginning as we get to the end of this decade and move through the next decade. So while Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto bring about all kinds of massive changes, Jupiter and Saturn are what's conscious on a social level. I like to call Jupiter our conscious beliefs, intuition, how we are consciously socializing with others and expanding our socializing skills. Saturn, the individuated structure of consciousness, or how we go about maturing and being able to function in any group with laws and norms and taboos. You know, these are the social planets saying, you guys got to be ready for some changes here, and you got to be ready to go with the flow. Here's a conjunction for when I just picked one. I'll go back. I thought, oh, here's Jupiter conjunct Pluto the second time. They're both retrograde there. I'll choose that date. Drew it up. Saturn retrograde. They're all three retrograde here, within orb taking place. You can see that Saturn is getting ready to move into its last quarter squares with Uranus. On that date, we just happen to have a T-square from the moon. We'll see how that date turns out as we get closer. South node's moved into Sag here. In 2017, with the Jupiter T-square, it was in Pisces. Now in 2020, it's in Sag. I got the feeling religion and spirituality and wars around those causes or ideologies probably won't be going away very soon. Perhaps with the South Node in Sag, there might be some spiritual breakthroughs that could happen, or the goal of the South Node in Sag, North Node in Gemini is realizing the relativity of truth. There's one natural, timeless, universal spiritual law and principle. We're all in process of discovering it, and we all have many individual paths to get there, including individual paths as countries. Can we start to get along and play in the same sandbox? Here's the U.S. chart again. I use the Gemini rising chart, okay, which is 2:13 a.m., July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia. And here is that stellium, getting closer and closer and closer to this Pluto return for the U.S. Jupiter's getting involved here. Money starts to come in the picture. Saturn is sitting here on the South Node in Aquarius. Whew. Revolution in the streets. I don't know. Stay tuned. Truth continuing to be exposed. Uranus is going to be just off of squaring the nodes in the U.S. chart. So skip steps in that liberation and resources for all. In other words, there's going to continue to be a fair amount of exciting trends that we're going to be working our way through as we move forward with Uranus and Pluto. So just briefly, I wanted to just list for you the Uranus waxing trines to Pluto, 5 of them, 2026 through 28, Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, 4 to 9 degrees respectively. I feel that these are too far in advance into the future to really give realistic forecasting. I did say with this whole trend, if we're not breaking free with monetary policies, we'll have a lot more, especially in 2 air signs. Whatever's not breaking free here, we'll have a rug, air signs, lies in our face, truth swept under our feet, under the rug in some way. Moving into the gibbous phase here, showing you this slide again. I have 3 more slides to show you. First of all, when they make those waxing sesquisquadrates, this is going to be just as important, just as active as waxing squares. We're also going to have 7 of them. This is when we move from first quarter to gibbous phase at 135 degrees. We're going to be 7 of them, sesquisquadrates, square and a half, 2031 through 2034. Uranus is going to vary between 26 Gemini to 3 degrees Cancer. Pluto will vary from 11 Aquarius to 18 Aquarius. The gibbous phase in general is where self must adjust to other. Libra, other one-on-one, going all the way out through the second half of the zodiac to Pisces to the ultimate other source energy. But the gibbous phase initiates this. Here's the actual inconjuncts of Uranus to Pluto, the 150-degree aspect. 7 of those again. 2036 through 2039. 19 degrees Cancer to 26 Cancer. Pluto, 19 Aquarius to 26 degrees Aquarius. And then finally, here's the Uranus-Pluto oppositions from their conjunction in the middle 60s in middle degrees Virgo, 16, 17 degrees Virgo. There were 3 conjunctions, 1965, 66. There will be 5 Uranus oppositions to Pluto between 2026 and 2048, from 3 to 8 degrees Uranus in Virgo and 3 to 8 degrees Pluto in Pisces. And so Pluto will be finishing up a host cycle through the zodiac by the mid-century, and that alone will create its own death and rebirth as Pluto moves into Aries, I think sometime in the 2060s. I didn't look that date up. You know, this is where all of the environmental issues will come back and be in our face because of the initial conjunctions. We'll see some types of human rights issues in our face. Probably every issue we've looked at here will come back into the cycle at this point. And so this is the last of my slides. I've gotten through the material that I wanted to address for you. And so I thank you for letting me share all this. I specifically wanted to look more at larger trends and give you an overview, and at the same time hopefully have been giving you some key words and phrases and subject matters that could be triggering you on what's happening in your world personally. Finally, what I want to leave you with is, again, this quote: "What is necessary to break free from the past in order to find the courage in the present to move forward into a new future?" Uranus Pluto. Maybe I should say, sincerely with love, Uranus and Pluto. Sorry, the humor coming through. I did not break and ask for questions. I was hoping to get through my material. Leroy did not interrupt me. Is there anything that perhaps I need to address for all the listeners on the board, Leroy?
No, it's actually been pretty quiet except for a couple of, just accessing the webinar issues, so you did very well.
All right. Well, remember, if any of you would like me to, address Uranus Pluto in your chart on an individual basis, you can go to the homepage of our website, and under forecasts, you can look down and see personal consultations, and you can purchase consultation with Kim Marie, and on checkout, enter coupon Uranus for a 20% discount. You may also call us at the number on the bottom of your screen, 605-348-5111, and contact us directly if you're interested in a reading. You can also email us at evolutionaryastrology.net.
Well, you better add Media Monk to that.
All right. Yeah, email Media Monk.
Media Monk at evolutionaryastrology.net. And also, I think you also promoted a course segment sale. Use that coupon code EVOLVE, EV as in Victor, OLVE, and get $50 off any segment of our 3 segments of our multimedia course as well. So thank you for considering that, and thank you for participating with us tonight.
And in front of you is our upcoming Public webinars list next week, March 9th. We'll look at Saturn retrograde in Sagittarius Scorpio. I got the feeling it might be a little bit of an emotional zinger for many of us because it's the end of the Scorpio cycle and it's going to go back there for 3 months and clean up anything we haven't looked at emotionally. So you're welcome to join me for that one. And in that regard, again, I thank all of you for showing up, and I wish you all the best in your future expansions with Uranus Pluto. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
And stop the recording, right, Kim?
Oh, thank you, Leroy. Yes, I'm doing recording on my end. Okay.